Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Access Granted here at Ruger Sports Media. Make sure to follow us on social media. You see it up there on the screen at Ruger Media on Twitter and Ruger Sports Media on Instagram, and also we're on Facebook as well. Today, we're joined here by Preston Guy of TigerBait.com. There's a big game between LSU and Arkansas. A lot of people around the country, even some people down here, are kind of worried about this game for LSU. LSU is definitely on the upset alert, and for good reason. The last four matchups between these two programs have been decided by 3 points in every single game, and really just given I think out of the last 24 matchups between these two programs, 15 of them have been determined by a possession or less. So Preston, welcome to the show, and we have to say about this game today.
Yeah, I mean, you need to expect a dogfight. There's no question about it. You're going to Fayetteville. You're after and following up an emotional win. By the way, you also have to fight the temptation to look ahead on the schedule to Texas A&M next week. Who, that's going to look like a top 15 matchup if LSU takes care of business today, and very well likely could be the host of College Game Day. So all of a sudden, you've got a pretty big game with Texas A&M looming. You're right on the heels of Ole Miss, and you're on the road against a sneaky good Arkansas football team, who, by the way, is coming off a bye and beating Tennessee the week before that. So they're feeling really good about themselves, and they're well rested, whereas LSU just had an overtime dogfight with Ole Miss. I think LSU's the better football team, but similar to last week where all the advantages went to LSU, all the advantages go to Arkansas in this matchup. So I think you're foolish if you're thinking this is going to be a colossal win for LSU.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Once again, this is Preston Guy of TigerBait.com. He does a lot of good work over there, along with Mike Scarborough. So make sure to check out TigerBait.com for all the latest on LSU football and recruiting as well, and also contribute over there with some recruiting articles as well. I should have an article about Bryson Martinez, the four-star offensive tackle from East Ascension out of the class of 2026, which is one of the strongest, probably Louisiana's ever had, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But Preston, you just talked about Arkansas coming off a bye week, coming off a huge win over Tennessee, while LSU is dealing, just had a really tight game, overtime game. So a lot of those bodies are tired, but at least you have C.J. Daniels coming back. Some guys are probably healthier than they probably were the week before. Who are still kind of battling some injuries. Although they did play a game, so I don't know how they feel going to this game. But what are some of the advantages that LSU has over Arkansas?
Well, I think LSU has a much better passing game. I think Garrett Nussmeier is one of the better passers in college football, and he also has ice in his veins. Of his 7 starts, he's had 3 game-winning drives he had to orchestrate in the fourth quarter. So the only time he didn't come through with a game-winning drive was against USC, and in all fairness, he did lead a game-tying field goal drive, and they got the ball back with 27 seconds to play. And, you got to go 80 yards in 27 seconds. That's not exactly a fair position to put a guy like Nussmeier in. So I don't know that you can really judge him on that. So ice in his veins, makes the clutch throws when he needs to. And by the way, against Ole Miss, those weren't high percentage throws. I mean, they were risky gambles. Then, like the 4th and 5 touchdown to tie the game and force overtime. That was his third read, and he threw Aaron Anderson open. So, I mean, talk about a gutsy performance by a player. Nussmeier and that passing attack, I think that's where LSU really has the advantage. Of course, Arkansas has a really good defensive line with Landon Jackson, but to counteract that, LSU has an elite pass blocking offensive line. Now, run blocking, that's another story, but they are some elite pass blockers. There's no doubt about it.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, you saw that last week against Ole Miss. Ole Miss came into the game first in the country in total sacks, and also sacks per game as well. And they held them to 0 sacks
on 51 attempts.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you're going up against the Arkansas defensive line. That's pretty solid as well. Of course, you got Landon Jackson, who was actually at LSU his freshman year, and he's actually had a has made a pretty good career out of himself
Yeah, he
at
has.
Arkansas. I think right now he has 2.5 sacks, 4.5 tackles for loss, 18 tackles. So what kind of challenges does this Arkansas defensive line bring to this offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, you led right with it. I mean, Landon Johnson is as strong a pass rusher. Don't let the stats fool you. He's a freak, man. He's a freak. Fortunately, you've got two bookend tackles who are going to have to deal with him all game long. And the real question to me is, can LSU run the ball consistently on this defensive line? I haven't seen much evidence this year to suggest it will, outside of a South Alabama game and parts of the South Carolina game where you know, I'm sorry, Caden Durham. I mean, he really brought some life, but I think last week we saw he had two dislocated toes and they weren't fully recovered, and he was nothing special against Ole
Right.
Miss. Um, and I think if you get him fully healthy and recovered, and I think that if this offensive line can give you some holes, you can all of a sudden develop a running game that wasn't there. And until you develop a running game, this is never going to be a consistent offense.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just certain situations you need to be able to run the ball and get 4 yards for. Until you can consistently get 4 yards, I'm talking more than 60% of the time,
Yeah.
it's always going to be a clunky offense that gets a lot of yards, throws the ball well, but you just have trouble converting easy down situations. Because if you look up at 3rd and 3, if 3rd and 3 is a sub 50% situation for you, your offense is never going to move the ball well. Period. That's just what it is.
Oh yeah, I mean, just definitely. I think that's been a major storyline for LSU's offense this year. You know, I think I think that was the one thing we didn't expect was just the inability to run the ball outside of Caden Durham. Josh Williams, he's had some ability. He's had some flashes here and there, but he's more of a short yardage running back than anything else, and he does an excellent job with that. And along with his pass blocking, Caleb Jackson really has been kind of the most disappointing player on this LSU offense, given the amount of hype that we all gave him going the years based
Yeah.
off his performance during the fall and even the spring. So it's Caleb Jackson with some injuries. Like, what's going on with him? It just seems like he hasn't really gotten his rhythm.
I think he beefed up to 235 and he might have maintained his speed. However, he did not maintain his ability to accelerate and have that burst.
Mhm.
I mean, he's averaging 3.3 yards per carry right now. You should be able to fall forward 2 or 3 yards, okay, after contact when you are 235 pounds like Caleb Jackson is. I think it's very obvious to me his acceleration has gone out the door, and he's not physical enough. He is at first contact, he's taking a seat. You have to question the core strength at that point. Like what
Yeah,
does your balance look like when you are taking a hit and you're just taking a seat? You need to fall forward and run with some violence at that size, and we're just not seeing that. He's acting like a scat back without the scat.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's been a colossal disappointment for Caleb Jackson, and I don't know necessarily that I can explain it. There's always things that go on behind the scenes with these players that we're not privy to. I do know that he's a guy who needs space to get up to full speed, and this offensive line has not done a good job of giving him space. But at the same time, I mean, you really have to point some of the blame back at him on his struggles this season.
yeah. I mean, just and I, speaking of the speed and person, just fighting. You spoke about running with violence. I mean, we saw that when he trucked Whit Weeks in the fall
Yeah.
practice, and just Whit Weeks
Yeah,
talked about
on a swing pass. I was there,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, and also I remember he talked about like how much Caleb Jackson had improved. So just given what not only the coaches have been saying, but also what the players are saying. We thought Caleb Jackson like a huge leap this year, but he
Yeah.
just hasn't. But speaking of what weeks, I mean, it just seemed like ever since Harold Perkins, was out for the year, it just seemed like Whit Weeks was destined to take a huge step in his game, and we saw that with his 18 tackle performance against Ole Miss last week. Um, you know, how much of a difference maker has? I mean, Greg Pence does some great stuff as well. I think that gets lost in the sauce as well. Greg Pence had a great year this year as well, but Whit Weeks, man, he's just just been the difference maker for this LSU defense.
He's been a freak, man. If you go into NCAA 25 and you build the stereotypical college football linebacker, it's what Weeks on the screen. Okay. Jersey folded up, gritty, tough guy all over the field, great instincts. Whit Weeks played the game of his life against Ole Miss. I mean, my goodness, he was all over the field. Talked to his dad. His dad's a football coach. Obviously the linebacking runs strong in his family. West Weeks on the team is also a linebacker. They also have a little brother who just got an offer from LSU to play linebacker as well. So it's like he's like a genetically bred linebacker. You know what I mean? Like from an early age, it was destined to be. So he's playing freaky good. I think getting Harold Perkins out of the picture, because if you remember, it actually wasn't a sure thing if he would be a starter this year or not. And because of Harold Perkins and Greg Penn, and are you going to run that 4-2-5 star defense? Well, okay, and I kept on telling people whether he starts or not, he's not finishing games with a clean jersey. That's what really matters. And now it's like you afford to take him off the field at this point. And I really hate to disparage a guy for getting hurt, and we all know what talent Harold Perkins was for LSU, but he just didn't really have a home. It was tough to find a role. This has a much more clear identity without him in the picks. It is what it is. And you've seen it's improved since he got hurt. I think this defense is best when Greg Penn and Weeks are on the field doing their thing.
Mm-hmm. And I just think it's just because both those guys, Greg Penn and Wood Weeks, are more of your traditional linebacker. Expected. Like they're what you see as a linebacker. While Harold Perkins was kind of like this hybrid type of, like, you didn't know where to put him. Like, is he a safety? Is he a guy you put on the edge, just rush off the edge? Is he inside backer? And I think, with Harold Perkins wanting to be an inside backer because that's where, he wants to be seen as when he gets to the NFL. I think that kind of hurt his, really hurt his development. But also what hurts him too is that he's not that big. I mean, he's listed. I think he's listed at like 6'1", 235. But I think he's more 6'1", 215. I mean, I don't think he's really gained all that much weight. I mean, I know he came in at like 200 pounds, but I don't think he's really gained all that much weight during his time at LSU.
Yeah, I wasn't seeing that, but more so than anything else, I think it's the instincts. Yeah. It just seems like he was having trouble reacting to plays on defense. I understand it's very low. He goes, but he could really use another year to develop and all that. Because I mean, yes, he's got the talent. I do think he struggles shredding blocks the way he should. But I think it's really just the ability to find the ball is what he seemed to struggle with, especially playing linebacker. And, I remember his freshman year, they put him at edge rusher and just said, go after the quarterback. In fact, against Arkansas, he had the game of his life. Single-handedly won that game for LSU. And it seems like as the assignments got more complex for him, he wasn't able to keep up. Makes you wonder, maybe it was the right thing to just have him be an edge rushing player where he doesn't have to react. It's like see ball, get ball type situation. It's not like backer we have to read, okay, is the offensive line stepping forward and run blocking, or are they stepping backward and doing a pass block? If it's a pass block, I need to step into coverage. If it's a run, then I have to translate my eyes from that lineman's foot to where's the running back going, and then I have to find the hole and go. It's just a lot more brain work, and it seems like that's where he struggled.
And I know I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but how much of Harold Perkins' lack of development has to do with Matt House?
I genuinely wonder how much of Matt House's problems were cultural. Okay. Do you ever remember an assistant who got fired from LSU who's just been so Publicly dunked on by people in the room as Matt House, even Jamar Cain, Jamar Cain was a defensive line coach who got fired. So yeah, I get it. Sour grapes. And he was basically waiting for an opportunity to dunk on Matt House after that one. I mean, he was patiently sitting around, and then boom, they get a win in New Orleans. It's like, well, that's close enough. I guess I can't coach in Louisiana.
Yeah. Wait, he got fired? I didn't know that. I thought he just left to join the Broncos.
No, they pushed him out. They
Okay.
absolutely pushed him out, and they went for Jimmy Lindsey, who, he had that Pete
Yeah.
Jenkins, um, um, you know, lineage there, and Lindsey, we never know if he would have turned out to be a good defensive line coach or not. He never was
Yeah.
there, so it was one of those things. Sorry, we can't afford. You might be a great coach. We can't afford another year of poor defensive line play. We have to go out and get the two
Yeah.
best defensive line coaches in the country to really fix this thing. And you're
Yeah.
seeing the results. I mean, what unit in the country has improved as much as LSU's defensive line? I mean, especially given it's mostly the same players.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like Braden Swinson wasn't on the team a year ago. He looks like an All-American. Parashan. I mean, you get what I'm saying. These guys were there a year ago.
And I'll make the case, Braden Swinson should have been the starting defensive end last year. Like every time he stepped on the field, it seemed like he was making the play or had some impact on the play. I mean,
Look,
I mean,
here's the deal. I mean, no one on that defensive line was making plays a year ago.
oh no,
It
but
doesn't
I think
matter. They rotated plenty of time. He had his. It was that these were all raw and needed some development and coaching. We saw weird stances. We saw guys lined up 2 yards off the ball.
oh my
I
god, I
mean, there
remember
was
that.
no edge contain, which, by the way, has improved tremendously, and nobody's really talking about it. Last year, if you were running on the outside on this team, you could do whatever you wanted. There was no outside control. There's no elbows in the side of tackles, making sure you have that leverage. It was just horrible. And Savion Jones was abysmal at it. I don't think I've seen a year of outside run control as bad as Savion Jones had a year ago, but the improvement has been tremendous. So, I mean, yeah. With Matt House, going back to him, the reports are from people smarter than me. I'm talking Brian Kelly's of the world. I'm talking NFL coaches, is that he is a brilliant coach and had a good scheme. It just did not catch on with players. And I have to think that as many people have publicly lashed out on him, there had to be some sort of like screw this guy situation. Look, I've played for a coach who everybody hated, and it didn't matter how he was coaching. We weren't receiving that coaching because we hated the
Right.
guy. And
Yeah.
that's a big part is you have to connect with young men. And any leader who people are, as soon as he's done talking, they're like, man, what is this bum doing? Your message isn't going to sink in. And I think that had a big part to do with it. I mean, you look at what Matt House did for the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's like, well, can he not coach linebackers? Look what he did for their linebacking core, and I just think that, in certain rooms, it doesn't connect well. I also had some problems with his scheme, but that's me saying that. I'm telling you, smarter people than me said he had a good scheme. I'm like, well, how's it a good scheme when you're just sitting back in cover 3 and letting them pick you apart and not doing anything creative whatsoever all season long? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, did he just accept that he has no DBs and has to do this soft zone coverage to just let them pick you apart? I don't understand it personally.
Which honestly shows you, the job Blake Baker's done because
Yeah.
it's basically the same team. It's basically the same DBs, and
Right.
really they're younger than they were last year. I mean, like a lot
of them are countries that they were off of last year.
Yeah, and then also Major Burns being at star is the perfect role for him. I mean, if you look, I mean, he led the team in tackles last year, but the problem, the knock on Major Burns, he wasn't a great coverage safety. They move him closer to the line, and he's been great. I know he's had his moments where it's like, oh, he should have made that play, but no, game against Ole Miss last week. I mean, he was awesome, and I think it will just see a continuous rise with Major Burns because he's more of a I made this comparison the other day. I saw somebody this the other day. He's a lot like PJ Williams, where PJ Williams cannot cover past 5 yards, but if you put him in the box, he's locked down. And I think that's what Major Burns is for this defense.
Yeah, it's been a tremendous improvement for him. You'd still like to see him a little bit on the back end on coverage. And I guess what stood out to me against Ole Miss is I thought if they were going to win the game, it's because their running game was going to improve and their offense scored a bunch of points. That did not happen. They ran the ball for 80 yards. They got outran by 100 yards. And I thought this defense is what it is, and you're not going to improve all that much. And it just, the story is what it is.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case. And I also thought on the defense, if it was going to improve, it's because you're going to put some of these talented young guys. I'm talking about Javian Tono. at star. I'm talking about, PJ Woodlands. I'm talking about those young type. We're
Yeah.
talking Deshaun Spears.
Hmm.
That wasn't the case. They
Right.
rolled with their veteran guys, Zaya Alexander, Ashton Stamps. Those guys were heroes of the game last week.
Yeah.
Unlikely heroes, but heroes nonetheless. And it's funny how football works out sometimes.
Yeah, sorry. That my reaction to was at college game day. So Lee Corso picked Texas, put on the Texas headgear, and all of a sudden their clock tower, they started blasting off fireworks and smoke and everything. I'm like,
Mm.
bro, it's like Texas is back, folks. That's you can see the more of that.
Yeah, I think
But
Texas wins today.
yeah, that's
They
what
look
that's
like
what
the most complete team in the country.
they do. I mean, they look like what Alabama should look, just complete, like offense and defense, like and shit. Yeah, I said that before the years. Like, yeah, I don't see Texas either. I think they're a 9-3 team. I think they're overrated. And I think when I started to see them play each and every game, the Michigan game was, Michigan I think is horrible on offense. I mean, that game really didn't show me anything. But as the year went on, and then also with Arch, even Arch was looking good. I'm like, man, this team is complete. Like
Threw two
top to
picks
bottom.
against ULM. I don't know. I
He
think Arch
did.
is good. I think Arch is
ULM's
good,
good.
but I think the player in the country stuff was really blown out of proportion,
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, he
mostly
was.
because of his last name, and he didn't ask for that. No one,
Yeah.
they just did it to him. But my impression watching Arch was he was a good quarterback, top 12 in the country, a
Yes.
good 4-star quarterback. Similar to Ricky Collins, probably not even the level of an Eli Holstein. Because I mean, Holstein and Zachary, he had a cannon, and he could
Oh,
run too. He was 4'8". So I just didn't get that out of Arch. Who he tended to struggle with downfield accuracy issues. I think he scored like a combined 12 points in 3 games against LCA. You know what I mean? So I mean, he's played all right for that's for sure.
yeah, and I'll say this, like I'll just defend Arch a little bit. I mean, if you put him on this year's even last year's Newman team, I think they're going to know. Like, because I think the team around him, I would say they weren't great. I mean, but his offensive line was not the biggest. And also I think just now if you look at the team Newman has this year, they're a lot more physical. They're bigger. They're not as finesse as they used to be. Usually are. So I think if you put them on this team, I think that is a bona fide dome team. And I know this because I cover high school football, and I
Right.
mean Newman's looking really good. I'm actually like Prep Bordelon, of course, offensive line's anchored by Prep Bordelon.
Right.
So yeah, it's really good offensive line, one of the better offensive lines in the state. But also the 2 interceptions when it gets ULM, and ULM has a hell of a defense, by the way, too. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think they only held JMU to like 19, like James Madison 19 points, and that's a really good offensive James Madison has. But kind of going back to LSU now, but LSU, this Arkansas has Taylor Green. I know Taylor Green. If you look at his touchdown and interception ratio, it doesn't look great. But he can throw the ball down the field. He's shown that in
Sure.
previous games. They're Arkansas. They still run the ball effectively. That's what they want to do. They're a very physical team. Their head coach is an offensive line coach at heart. So how does this defense respond to this balanced attack from Arkansas?
Hopefully with a QB spy, but I was on Hunt's show this weekend, and Hunt Palmer, he asked me, "Who do you do the spy with Weeks?" I was like, "Ooh, this would be a game you'd really like to have a Harold Perkins out there." But
Yeah,
he brought up a good idea. Maybe use Major Burns as a
yeah,
spy at that star position, but the star has to play on the outside. So I guess you just pick the wide side of the field and spy him from that side. Maybe shift the defensive line over. But I would like to see him get contained. He's a good runner. Passing the ball, look, he's got talent. I know he's only completed 56% of his passes. Has 5 interceptions to 5 touchdowns this year, but he can stretch the field, man. Make no mistake, he is a talented player, and he's a guy when he gets hot, he could give you some trouble. So I think that's. Of course, you got Jaquin Jackson who's running the ball pretty darn well himself. He's on track for a 1,000-yard season. So I think that does play into LSU's hands a little bit better. Because LSU's better against the run than they are the pass. But man, make no mistake, it's a tricky team. Bobby Petrino, he's dialing up a scheme. There's no doubt about it.
I can't think of a weirder situation with Bobby Petrino being the offensive coordinator because
Doesn't happen
you know,
often, does it?
I mean, I've seen I've seen coaches, be a head coach of a certain program, and then they're like the defense coordinator or offense coordinator at that program because like the head coach is a guy that either they played for or that played for that head coach
Sure.
or coach under him or whatever. And they just asked him to be on the staff to help out a bit. And Rocky Lawn did that, I think.
Imagine Lane Kiffin hires Ogeron as D-line coach.
Yeah, like it'd be like, well, I think he's done that before. He did that at Tennessee.
Yeah, he did that at Tennessee, but Ogeron was the head coach of Ole Miss.
That's true. Yeah. I get what you're saying. So,
I
but
mean, imagine if Brian Kelly this last year had reached out to Ed Ogeron instead of Bo Davis and Kevin Peoples, because
yeah,
there was probably some fans in the back of their mind. They're like, wow, he can coach defensive line and recruit very well. But no, you don't do that unless you're in absolute desperation mode, which is exactly what Sam Pittman was in. He was in desperation mode to get someone who could call the plays and was familiar with the area in the SEC, and that's just what he did. We'll see if it works out for him. It looks like he might save his job.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even that, the circumstances of like what happened when Bobby Petrino was the head coach that led him to getting fired. I mean, it was just. I know that it was the whole, well, he got in a motorcycle accident. There was a lot more stuff that happened.
I'm sure he's not allowed to have interns anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy. It was just crazy to deal what happened, but now he's back as the offensive coordinator. I just can't think, and that's what makes it weird. It's not the fact that he's the former head coach for a certain program, but just everything that happened that led him to getting booted out of Arkansas. And really, Arkansas had not been the same since, because Arkansas was rolling. I mean, Arkansas was like a legit top 10 team. Actually, in 2011, which was Petrino's last year, the match between LSU and Arkansas determined the SEC West. If you think about it, because LSU's number 1, Arkansas's number 4. If LSU ended up winning, but if Arkansas won that game, they would have been at the SEC championship and may have competed for a national title. But since that motorcycle accident, Arkansas has either been a middle of the table SEC team or the worst of the worst. I mean, there's no in between with the Arkansas program since Petrino got fired. But just going back to the passing attack led by Taylor Green. I mean, I know they're 24th nationally, 5th in passing offense, averaging 285 yards per game. But they're not that efficient. They're 86th nationally, and they're 14th in the SEC in passing efficiency, which is, they're 16 teams, so they're right at the very bottom. So is this a game? This is the perfect game for LSU's secondary, especially on the back. Really, not so much the cornerbacks, but the safeties to get more comfortable playing back there. Especially a lot of the issues in the passing game has been towards the back end.
Yeah, I mean, safeties have not been the strength of this team this year. I'll tell you this, I feel a lot more confident. I probably saw more one-on-one pass breakups from the corners with just deep downfield man coverage than I saw all last year, just against Ole Miss. I mean, it was an unbelievable performance by Zy Alexander. Ashton Stamps was right there with him, and that helps your safeties a lot when your corners can give you that kind of support. But I mean, it's still a concern. Just because he had one good game against Ole Miss doesn't mean those guys have found the cure. They have to continue to improve and play sound assignment football and frankly be able to identify the ball in the air. That was one thing that I last year is these all was in there. They would have good coverage. They just could not identify the ball and swat it. And I think that's one thing Corey Raymond has really worked hard to improve. So same thing goes with these safeties, man. Jordan Gilbert or Deshaun Spears or Sage Ryan, whomever they stick back there, yeah, they better get ready to be tested because Arkansas will stretch the field, man.
Speaking of Corey Raymond, I have to apologize to Mr. Corey Raymond for because I said before when we were looking for essentially a whole new coaching staff, I was like, I won't mind bringing back Corey Raymond, but I still have questions because near the end of his tenure, LSU's pass defense was struggling. I mean, and a lot of that probably had to do with scheme and having a new defensive coordinator 2 years in a row, and a lot of stuff that goes into that. But they were struggling, and they struggled, of course, at Florida as well, which you could also say is because of scheme. But he struggled at Florida as well.
Sure.
Struggled really even recruiting. And really, I mean, and that's not even his fault because Napier basically hired him to hire kids away from Louisiana, which did not work out. but it's been working out. But it's been working out since he came back to LSU. The cornerbacks have looked much better over the
Well,
course of the
let me
year.
throw this out. The jury is definitely still out on Corey
Yes.
Raymond,
Okay.
and improvement is there, but is it good enough? Let's put it like this: Corey Raymond has not had a defense that ranks top 75 in passing defense since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Every defense he's been a part of has ranked basically in the 80s or lower. In fact, some of them have been in the hundreds. Like if you look at that, like say that 2020 defense where he was the DB coach of, but his recruiting seems to be certainly back. I mean, they got DJ Pickett coming in, and um, his recruiting has definitely been good, but we'll have to see, man. I mean, it's been you don't see very many coaches at this level get to put as many paltry defensive backfields together in a row consecutively as Corey Raymond does and still have the respect that he has. He's got to eventually get his defense playing well on the field, not just on the recruiting front. He has to get them improved. And improve from where they're at because they have improved from a year ago, but that's like saying, that's like saying, you went 0-12 and now you're 3-9. You got better. Sure, but you're still not where you need to be happy. Certainly not for a program like LSU. So a lot of improvement. I would like to see this passing crack that 75 and show some steps in the right direction. Obviously, I don't think LSU is a program with the pipeline they have of defensive back recruits. There's no excuse for this program to be ranking as low as it has
Mm-hmm.
against the pass for half a decade.
Yeah.
It's been half a decade. And even that 2019 unit wasn't elite against the pass either. No, they had Derek Stingley and all that, but we know what Joe Burrow and company were doing. So, I mean, look, jury is still out on Corey Raymond. I'm not sitting here selling you that he has fixed the program, but there's been some progress noticed. And let's say this: if the defensive backs improve at the rate they're improving from game 1 against USC versus game 6 against Ole Miss, if that rate of progress continues, we will be talking about a good defensive backfield this year.
And to be fair to Corey Raymond, he's not the defensive backfield. He's the quarterback's coach. I mean, Jake Olson, of course, is
Right. Jake Olson's also back there, right?
And he's really a young coach. He's a really young coach. I mean, we talked about Kevin Peoples, talked about Bo Davis. We talked about, of course, Blake Baker, and then Corey Raymond. All those guys have coached for a very long time. Jake Olson, was he was, I think it was either he was a GA or an analyst for Missouri last year.
Yeah, he was.
This is really, I think, his first. Well, I'm not saying it's his first full time,
right? But he's the guy
full time at a Power 4 program.
He is who Blake Baker wanted to promote. He's the guy who he saw as the hot hammer, and he gave him that chance. So we'll see how that works out.
Oh yeah, definitely. The safety still have room to improve. Even though the safety still not look great, there's still room to improve. And really, I mean, guys like Deshaun Spears, he has a lot of bright spots. I know he struggled, but then a lot of that has to do with him being a true freshman. But he's had a lot of bright spots. And the thing about this defense, I've said this all, even before the year, like, don't expect them to be a top 20, 25 defense, like, because that's not how that works. But you want to see them constantly improve. And that's the only thing you can ask for this defense, because they have a lot of good players, but it may not be the right players for what LSU's trying to do, right? Sage Ryan is a perfect example. Jardine Gilbert, it's really struggled. I mean, look at some of the guys in the back end; they've really struggled. And I think once these next few recruiting classes are really important for LSU to bring in to keep, so you can compete with the Texas, you can compete with Georgia, you can compete with Ohio State, Oregon, because the more guys you bring in like that, the more like you're going to win that championship. And going kind of segue into recruiting, LSU right now is the number 3 recruiting class in the country. Of course, Bryce Underwood, number 1 player in the country at quarterback. Carlin Berry's coming in. DJ Pickett, of course, is coming in. And this is a huge class for LSU. Do you think that Brian Kelly and Co could keep this recruiting class together?
Well, they better. They better. I think that there's even more to get. You have to get Thanos. You have to get Jakeem Stewart. You cannot let a player that talented, talking about, one of the top defensive linemen in the country in your home state, he's now reclassified to 2025. So now he's on the clock all of a sudden. He's not a 2026 guy anymore. So you got to keep them. Yeah, I mean, there's been rumors of Bryce Underwood getting a big NIL offer from Michigan, and of course Dave Portnoy. He's put out that he wants to pay for Michigan to get an elite quarterback. Here's the deal. He's from Michigan, right? About an hour outside the stadium.
I think he's from Detroit, the Detroit area. Yeah.
He's from Ypsilanti or Belleville, right out of Ypsilanti, which is where Eastern Michigan's at. That's pretty close. So, anyways, he, he's grown up around Michigan, and it seems like everybody talked about it being in LSU, Michigan. I talked to his former coach, and I talked to his dad, and I got the vibe that he just was not interested in Michigan, like, at all. He was watching Daniels. He was watching Joe Burrow to Death Valley on Saturday night. They put him on the big board. He wanted to be. He loved Joe Sloan. And his family has raved about the job they've done. Like LSU's taking care of him with NIL just fine. And I think he's just kind of made up his mind. In fact, in addressing the rumors of him flipping to Michigan, he put out a laugh emojis on Instagram. He was laughing at the idea of it. So, look, I can't crawl inside the kid's head. I've floated as many feelers as I can out there. Everything that I know of is he's LSU. He's LSU through and through. Harlem Berry is as firm as you can be, so no risk of losing him. I think DJ Pickett, he continues to take visits, but he's very vocal about his support for LSU, and we're really coming down the line here. We're in October. Signing day is, less than 60 days away. So, we're kind of in the home stretch with these guys. Point being, I think LSU will be in fine position to keep what they've got, especially their star players. It's about, can you add one more crown jewel to this class? Because if you add Jakeem Stewart to this class, we're not only talking about the number one class in the country. We're probably talking about, is this LSU's best class that's ever signed? Is this better than the 01 class? I don't know if you've pulled a recruit as big as Bryce Underwood. You've landed number one recruits in the country. You've landed 5-star quarterbacks. I don't think you've ever landed a quarterback that was the number one recruit in the country. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Yeah, I know I was actually, when he committed, before he committed to LSU, I was actually looking at, I think it was right after he committed to LSU. I was looking at, the players that LSU's brought in, and as of right now, according, I think it was 24/7, that he's the highest recruit that's ever signed with LSU. I think the next guy was Russell Shepard.
Well, there'd be Leonard Fournette, but if you're talking about quarterback, Leonard Fournette.
No, just highest recruit, period. Just out of any position. But also, these sites also value quarterbacks more than a lot of positions. So, I think this is the highest rated quarterback LSU signed really since Ryan Perley. And that was probably, Ryan Perley is one of the biggest what ifs in LSU.
Really since ever. That's, and since Perley, they actually have signed Russell Shepard was a bigger quarterback commit than Ryan Perley. But LSU's never landed the number one overall player in the country who was a quarterback. It's just never happened. Leonard Fournette was the number one player in the country, running back. And of course, he was a beast and all that good stuff. But I think it's a very strong argument that Bryce Underwood may be the biggest singular recruit LSU's ever pulled in. Obviously a competitive title, no doubt.
Oh yeah. I think this is this is could be the most consequential, signing. And if Bryce Underwood does sign with LSU, and hopefully he does, hopefully for LSU's sake that he does ball out. I think if you look at Bryce Underwood in itself, is probably the most consequential prospect that LSU's ever brought in. Yes, but especially under the Brian Kelly era, because the knock on LSU has been, they were a quarterback cemetery, and that was the case for a very long time. Joe Burrow kind of helped. Joe Burrow kind of helped with that, and then obviously Jane Daniels. But those guys were transfers; they weren't high school recruits that came into LSU. This is the first one that LSU's, even Mendenberg. Think about the three best quarterbacks that LSU's had in the last decade. Mendenberger, Burrow, and Daniels were all guys they got.
You want me to make you feel old real quick?
Yeah.
Mendenberger was more than a decade ago.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. He has because I was because when Medberger first played, I was
2013. 2013 was his
2012.
last year.
Yeah, 20. I was like a freshman in high school. Like so, that was a
Hmm.
really long time ago. Yeah, but over a decade ago. So I mean, if you think about the last 15 years, the best quarterbacks LSU's ever had have been Mettenberger, Burrow, and Daniels, and all three of them
Transfers. Yep.
were brought in at
Hmm.
Cheshire.
Well, and,
So
and Nussmeier has a chance to do something that hasn't been done since Jarrett Lee and Jordan Jefferson, and that is even have a quarterback start at LSU and graduate at LSU, complete his eligibility,
that's true.
right? No quarterback has done that since Jarrett Lee and Jordan Jefferson in 2011. It's been 13 years.
Yeah,
That's uncanny. Yeah, I think LSU would like to um, rebrand itself away from transfer quarterback right.
yeah,
But that's a little bit of that the nature of the time we're in for college. Guys don't want to sit and wait their turn, and they're gonna wait 2-3 years, sometimes one. And if they're not starting, all right, we're moving on. I think at most with Bryce Underwood, you would have 1 year with him not being the starter, and that's only if Nussmeier comes back. If
mhm.
Ricky Collins or Colin Hurley were to beat him out, I don't think he's sticking around.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking of Bryce Underwood, real quick. I mean, and I think a lot of it has to do with Joe Burrow, of course, and his success at LSU, and then also moving forward towards the NFL. But I think a lot of his recruitment had to do with Jaden, because if you look at the way that Bryce likes to play, he likes to be he's a don't threat guy. He wants to run the ball as pass. And Jaden Daniels was really the first quarterback LSU had where he could do both. And I think just knowing the offense is, they're not going to Michigan, really. I know they won the national championship last year. Now they've had more success than LSU's had the last few years, of course, going to three straight playoffs and winning the Natty last year. But the knack of Michigan is that their offense is archaic. I mean, last year they got away with it, just because they had dudes on offense that could do whatever the hell they wanted. And the quarterback, JJ McCarthy, say we want, but JJ McCarthy, but I didn't realize how good he was until we got into the NFL. And you started to see, oh, this is why he was drafted first round. Unfortunately, he got hurt, so we had no idea if he was going to be that guy or not this year. Um, but Michigan's offense is archaic. Meanwhile, LSU, you could plug in whatever quarterback you want. You went from Jane Daniels to Garrett Nussmeier, and the offense is still effective for putting up yards. And I think that's more appealing to a guy like Bryce Underwood, who wants to play in the play in the play at a school like LSU and put up yards and do whatever he wants to do. But I know, Preston, you got to leave pretty shortly. But Preston, one last thing before we hop on. LSU wins if
Saints that showed up up again. Yeah, LSU wins this game. I mean, Blake Baker called the game of his life. And I think that if these guys continue to play like that, yeah, I think LSU wins this game. I know that's a performance that, statistically speaking, we're not going to see them repeat, but if that defense shows up, I think I have enough confidence in Nussmeier and this offense to do it. Another caveat: if LSU can run the ball consistently, LSU runs this game. So I think one of two of those you got to hit. You cannot go 0 for 2. Your defense cannot go out there and look as inconsistent as it's looked at times this year. And your offense cannot go out there and not run the ball whatsoever, and you win this football game. I think you need one of those two to hit.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, this is Preston Guy of TigerBait.com. He and Mike Scarborough do a lot of great stuff with LSU recruiting and LSU football in general over there. Of course, I also write with them as well, contribute some articles about recruiting. And I'm going to have one out about Preston Martinez pretty soon. And also, we'll have a few more planned out, once I put up my schedule and everything. But Preston, thanks for hopping on to talk a little about LSU football. Thank you for giving us some great insight as well into this game. And have a great weekend and go Tigers.
See you, man.
No problem. All right, guys. That was Preston Guy of TigerBait.com. Once again, make sure to follow him at Twitter at PGuy77. Does a lot of great stuff over there at TigerBait.com. I'm glad that he's a colleague of mine. Of course, I've been covering LSU sports for the last 2 years or so, and he's been a huge help in my career and helping me out whatever I need, and also being a colleague with them at TigerBait.com. But before we hop off, I also want to make sure. So there's a lot of good. The LSU game is at 6 o'clock p.m. on Central Time on ESPN. Uh, so it's a primetime game. Arkansas fans will be very happy to welcome in their longtime rival in LSU. Should be a great one. It's gonna be a very close game. Don't expect it to be a blow. I know a lot of people are like, why is everyone picking Arkansas over LSU? Why is Josh Pate picking Arkansas over LSU? This game has been really close. I know LSU and Arkansas are two different programs in terms of where they stand. I mean, LSU's won 3 national championships, appeared in 4 national title games in the last 25 years. While Arkansas has been to a SEC championship here and there. I think they went to it twice. I know the last time they went to it was 07. Oh, no, 06, when they had Darren McFadden going off and doing great things. But this game is, and like I said earlier, 15 of the last 24 meetings between these two programs have been determined by a possession or less. So that's 8 points or less. So this is a huge game for LSU. And of course, next week you have A&M, which will be another tough matchup. That will be a top 15, maybe even a top 10 matchup. If a few teams lose, and of course LSU has to win, of course, but I mean maybe a few teams lose, that puts A&M back in the top 10. So it could be a top 10 matchup at Kyle Field, and that's a place LSU has not won since 2016. So it's been a little while. So you definitely want to start off with the right foot with a win over Arkansas. I think this game would be close. I think LSU should pull off the win. But once again, it's at Fayetteville at 6 o'clock at night. Their fans are going to be rabid and inebriated. I guess that's the more professional way of saying it. So you want to make sure. So LSU wants to make sure that you start off early. You start off throwing punches early, and you keep throwing punches until the final whistle. I think that's the best way for LSU to win this game. You can't afford to start off slow against this Arkansas team that is still very good, very explosive. I mean, they average over 500 yards a game. They're one of the top passing offenses in the country. Although even though they're inefficient, they're averaging 285 through the air. They're rushing attack, led by Quentin Jackson is a very good rushing attack, averaging about 200 yards a game. So this is a very formidable opponent for LSU. I know all the national media outlets are have LSU on upset alert, and it's true. This is a game where LSU is definitely on upset alert, and whenever LSU plays Arkansas, they're always on upset alert. Like I said, the last 4 meetings have been determined by 3 points. And then the last 15 of 24 meetings, 15 of those have been determined by a possession or less. So, very important game for LSU to win. 6 o'clock Central Time on ESPN. Once again, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Ruger Sports Media on YouTube and share this video to as many people as possible so we get our name out there. And then also follow us on social media. Of course, you see it up there. Ruger Media on Twitter, Ruger Sports Media on Instagram. So make sure to follow us on those 2 social media platforms as well as Facebook as well. But with that being said, I'm Grant Chachere, owner and podcast host of Ruger Sports Media. We'll see you guys later. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a reaction video tonight because I want to work on some stuff, but I might, depending on what happens. I'll give a recap of the game. But we'll see you guys later. And as always, go Tigers.